What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadski, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video, and today we're having a look at the next super evolution to come out here on Treasure Cruise, which is going to be Sanji and Pudding. This is a crazy one. This is by far, this is not 100% confirmed. This is just from the data miners that have data mined like the next season of Pirate Rumble, and apparently this is going to be the next 6+, which is pretty cool. I'm all excited for this one. This is actually the first Kizuna limited Sugofest character in the game, in terms of a legend. So this is a pretty big one. Obviously, last month we just had the 6+ of Crocodile, which was the first treasure map legend to get a 6+. Now we're already kicking it into Kizuna characters, which is pretty cool. Sanji and Pudding, while currently they don't have like the best skills, when they first came out, they were pretty important because they had a very unique special ability that not many characters really can do, being able to remove not only one, but two defensive effects on the opponent completely. And the fact that we're getting them with a 6+ now leads to very interesting things that they could do to improve this character. So we're over here on the database to have a little bit of a breakdown in terms of what they do currently, and we can kind of see and extrapolate what they could potentially do to improve this character upon super evolving. But not only that, remember the character is going to receive level limit break as well, which is a pretty big deal. So let's go ahead and have a look. So Sanji is quick cerebral fighter, and then Pudding is dex cerebral shooter. Look at the captain ability here. Sanji Captain gives an attack boost to fighter and cerebral 4x, 1.35 times HP, 10% damage reduction, strength and dex slots will be beneficial to fighter and cerebral. So as you can see, not a very exciting captain ability. Pudding is very similar, but it's for fighter and cerebral as well. She does boost fighter and cerebral even though she is cerebral shooter. That's kind of interesting. I would like it if all of their captain abilities would just boost fighter, cerebral, and shooter. I think that's what they should do, to just add an additional class to it, because why not? She was less of an attack multiplier, but she did give a 1.5 times recovery boost, which is kind of underrated. And then in their combined form, they basically took all components, being a 5 times captain, 1.35 times HP, 1.5 times recovery, 10% damage reduction, strength, dex, and quick beneficial. So as I said, I think the main thing is to add the shooter class to the captain. I think that'd be a huge change. Obviously, the multipliers need to increase. Potentially, they could add end of turn healing. That would be a really nice effect. But being able to resist a certain debuff by 5 to 10 turns, I think that would be a perfect thing to do. In terms of what debuff though, maybe reducing the pain debuff in the captain ability would give this character like a point of difference. Removing the effect of like whenever you heal, you take damage instead. That would be a really nice effect. They could add a lot of different things to this, but if they add a utility piece in their captain, that would obviously be a big deal. Potentially, because this character is focused around Sanji and Pudding, and they're cooking and they're baking, potentially similar slot manipulation would be something that could be on the cards as well. Being able to manipulate slots, potentially make them beneficial as a captain, would obviously be a big deal. That would be a really unique way to make this character usable, because similar slots obviously being kind of similar to rainbow slots, they can't be manipulated by the opponent. You can lock them for multiple turns and your opponent just can't do anything about them. That's a really big deal. So captain ability needs a pretty big buff, because as it stands, this character's pretty bad as a captain. But even then, even when this character first came out, this character wasn't really being used as a captain. This character was predominantly being used as a crewmate because of the beneficial effects you'd get from that, and the captain ability didn't really provide that much to you. So moving forward from that, one of the limit break crewmate abilities is resisting silence by 5 turns. So this is special bind, not the one where you can't swipe up or down on the character. So reducing special bind by 5 in the crewmate ability. I actually kind of never realized that they had this. So the fact that they do have this, they could potentially add special bind removal in the special, because the character doesn't have that. So that would be a nice change too. Now the switch effect. So this character will be super evolving, so we're likely going to see a super switch. So this is the current switch, where it removes despair, paralysis, and slot bind on themselves, changes their own orb including block into matching, recovers 25% of the damage taken from enemies on the stage when entering a new stage. So this is very similar to like Hawkins and Katakuri V2, where whenever you move into a new stage, however much damage you took, you heal 25% of that damage. So I can see this being pretty much the same. I don't think this needs much changing. I do hate that these are debuff removals just for themselves. Usually debuff removals for the crew are way more valuable. But usually the base switch doesn't change that much, so I'm not expecting much change there. As I said before about Semler slots, potentially changing their own slot into Semler would be cool, and then making the beneficial as a captain and a crewmate I think would be a really nice touch, but we'll see. In terms of a super switch though, I mean, they could go in a lot of different avenues. I think that they could... I mean, what could they do? They could buff this so that this would be like a 50% recovery. Being able to change adjacent slots into Semler as well as their own slot into Semler would be a pretty big deal. So if you put the character in the middle row, you can get 4 guaranteed Semler slots. That would be a really nice change. There's a lot of different things that they could do. They could add like just removing certain debuffs by X amount of turns when you activate the super switch as well. I really hope they don't go down that route where if you activate the super switch, they combine into their dual form and then their special will be buffed when they're in their dual form. I'm not a big fan of that design of dual unit because it basically means you have to get the super switch, and in content where they don't give you the switch gauge at the start of the quest, it can be just a very frustrating time. So we'll see, but that could be on the cards as well. We'll see. Special ability though, it doesn't do a whole lot, but what it does do is good, where it recovers 15,000 HP, just a flat recovery. So it's not the greatest recovery in the world, it's just a little chunk of HP. But then this is a big one here, removing % damage reduction, rainbow shield, and then threshold damage reduction completely. And the cool thing about Sanji Pudding is because it is a Sanji character, meaning you could go ahead and put on Onami support on this character, which sets enemies' defense to 0 for 2 turns. So this character can remove Rainbow Shield, Threshold, and then the support of Nami can set their defense to 0 so long as they can have their defense reduced, all in one special ability activation. So that's a really powerful way that a lot of people would use this character in the past. Furthermore, they also provide a color affinity boost to Fighter and Cerebral, 2.25 for 2 turns, and then they combine into the dual unit for 3 turns. So the special ability definitely needs more buffs. The color affinity boost needs to be buffed likely to 3 turns, probably a 2.5 times, and then obviously adding shooters to this as well would be a pretty big deal. Even though in their dual form they are considered Fighter and Cerebral, I still think adding the shooter class would be nice. But we'll see how they go about that. They might not do that, but we'll see. Now, what else could they add? I mean, they could just straight up just add, like, remove Blue Shield completely to this as well. Like, remove all 3 of those key defensive effects completely. I will say, though, that they typically haven't done that. Like, they probably won't add another removal completely. I think that would be a little bit too much of a buff. But I think that they could definitely add other types of debuff removal, like the other healing-focused ones, like where recovery slots become damage or healing becomes damage. We talked about those potentially being removed in the captain ability, but if they want to, you know, segment that into the special or even the super switch ability, adding that effect to remove those debuffs would be nice. And we talked about the pain debuff a little bit earlier too. I think that would be a nice removal effect to add within the special. You know, the pain debuff is one of the most frustrating ones to deal with in the game. We don't have that many pain debuff removers. There are a couple of them. They have been releasing more of them. But the other good way, obviously, to get around that is with HP Guard. And HP Guard could also be a mechanic that they could improve upon and add to this character as well. So there's a lot of different ways they could go about it. But because this character is so focused on being kind of like a supporter-style character, kind of defensive, I think that we're probably going to see more of that. I'm not expecting huge damage bumps. I think it's going to be like more mellow and more, you know, gimmick removal, debuff removal, supporter-style character. And we also mentioned that their crewmate ability does remove 5 turns of special bind. If they add that into the special ability, that would also be a pretty big positive. If they buff this to 6 turns to remove 6 turns of special bind, that would be super, super cool. So another thing that before we end the video, we'll talk about the potential abilities. They do have Hunger. They were one of the first characters with Hunger, which is a big deal. They have Pinch Healing, and they also have the Recovery Bind removal as well. It removes 10 turns of it, by the way, which is actually quite a lot for a potential ability. So that's a nice touch. And then their Rumble stuff, they were actually pretty good when they first came out for Rumble. You can see at level 5, for the first 40 seconds, level 6 attack down to all enemies. If they make this attack down and defense down, I'd be pretty down for that. And then it also, well, you can see here that it automatically will give level 2 special CT down to everyone and level 2 defense down to everyone. So this is permanent, but then the attack down is just for the first 40 seconds. So these definitely need to be buffed, considering we have characters like Versus Blackbeard that just give amazing amount of debuffs to the enemies at all times, where I think that this probably needs to be buffed. They could make this like level 4, and they could make this like maybe even level 8, and maybe even add further defense down just for the first 40 seconds, and then after the first 40 seconds have passed, then you just get like the lower value defense down. So that would be what I would do if I was going to buff Sanji and Pudding to make them a little bit more usable. I guess we'll have a look at the special. 35 CT, which is pretty high, inflicts level 9 speed down debuff to all enemies for 20 seconds, and then does 2.5 times damage to 3 enemies. So this is pretty terrible. This needs a pretty big buff. If they're going to leave it at 35 seconds, this damage needs to be increased by quite a lot. I would say this needs to be at least 3.5 times damage, and I would target 3 enemies with the lowest HP so that you can potentially get knockouts. The fact that this character is also like supposed to be like defensively focused and gimmick removal, healing focused, I wouldn't be shocked if they added a healing component to this. Also, removing like speed down level 9 is a pretty big speed down debuff for the 20 seconds after you launch the special. But you gotta remember that this is a 35 CT. By the time this character launches their special, your opponents have probably already launched their specials as well. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal to remove speed. So I don't expect them to change this. Usually they don't change the specials that much. So I'm probably expecting this to stay the same, maybe even for a longer duration, or maybe even more speed debuff. I would prefer another debuff on top of this, potentially special CT debuff, so that after they've launched their specials, you can use this special. It lowers their CT for a certain amount of time for the next 20 seconds, and then it enables you to, you know, kind of like get back into the game. I think that would be a nice touch to remove special CT down with their special ability. But you gotta remember, this character is in their dual form in Rumble, so they're Fighter and Cerebral. So are you really going to use them in a Fighter team? Maybe. Fighters do need quite a lot of support, so this potentially could be a way to buff Fighters. Cerebral already have quite a lot going for them. They're not like the best team ever. They kind of lack a little bit of synergy, and even if this character did receive the buffs that we kind of talked about, I'm not expecting this character to be a game changer for the Cerebral squad, which is unfortunate, because Cerebral have a lot of good characters in like PvE content, but for PvP, they're a little weird. They're a little weird and wonky, and dual units are really difficult to use in Rumble because they lack the typings, and a lot of the good synergies are typing focused. So again, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm not expecting this character to be changing stuff too much in terms of the Rumble meta. In terms of the regular abilities, there is a lot that needs to happen to make this character a lot better, but it is exciting either way to see that a Kizuna Clash legend is going to be receiving a Super Evolution buff. So of course, when we do receive that information, it is going to be whenever we get the data download for the Kizuna Clash stuff of December, so we'll have to wait and see, of course. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions about Sanji and Pudding and what you expect with their 6+ down below in the comment section. I'm actually kind of interested to see what they do with the artwork of the character as well. They could do a lot of different things, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully you enjoyed it though. If you did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to stay up to date with all the content that I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. On that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.